Your true wealth is your time and freedom. Money is just a tool for trading your time. It's a container to store your economic energy until you're ready to deploy it. But the whole world has been turned away from real money and has been fooled into using currency. A deceitful imposter that is silently stealing your two most valuable assets, your time and your freedom. Welcome to the rabbit hole.
We are entering a period of financial crisis that is the greatest the world has ever known. The wealth transfer that will take place during this decade is the greatest wealth transfer in history. Wealth is never destroyed, it is merely transferred, and that means that on the opposite side of every crisis there is an opportunity. The great news is that all you have to do to turn this crisis into your great opportunity is to educate yourself. I believe that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is your own education. Education on the history of money, education on finance, education on how the global economy works, education on how all of these guys, the central bankers, the stock market, how they can cheat you, how they can scam you. If you learn what is going on and how the financial world works, you can put yourself on the correct side of this wealth transfer. Winston Churchill once said that the further you look into the past, the further that you can see into the future. This program is all about creating your own crystal ball, being able to gaze into the future, being able to change this crisis, the greatest crisis in the history of mankind, into your great opportunity. The hidden secrets of money, some of them are hidden in plain sight. They're like right in front of you. The way the monetary system works is something that isn't actually hidden away from all of us. It's out in the open, but it's complex and people just they can't see how it works. It's hard for them to imagine that we're living in such a hoax. Others are meant to be secret, but the truth is slowly coming out, like the Federal Reserve being a private corporation and not really part of the U.S. government. But when I started studying this, what I found was that there was no place that I could point people to where they could get it all in one spot. And so I basically decided to write my book about it and consolidate monetary history, economics, the markets, fundamentals of gold and silver. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in economics, and I've sort of made it my job to lift the fog for people.
Welcome to Egypt. This is where it all began. Roughly 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians started using gold and silver as their predominant form of currency. But it was not yet money. The pieces of gold and silver that they were using were odd sizes and weights, odd purities, so it still was not interchangeable, where each unit is the same as the next. This meant that nothing really had a price yet. You couldn't put a price of so many coins on something because they didn't have coins yet. Trade was still difficult. It was still a guessing game when it came to the exchange of values. One of the reasons that we are in the financial mess that we are today globally is that people do not understand the difference between currency and money. Currency is a medium of exchange, a unit of account. It is portable, durable, divisible, and something called fungible. Fungible means that each unit is the same as the next unit. A dollar in my pocket buys the same amount as a dollar in your pocket. Money is all of those things plus a store of value over a long period of time. Even financial planners, bankers, your accountant, they don't understand the difference between currency and money. The currency in your pocket is a medium of exchange. It's a unit of account because it's got numbers on it. It's somewhat durable, it's portable, it's divisible in that you can make change, and it's fungible. A dollar in my pocket buys the same amount as a dollar in your pocket. But because governments can print more and more and more of it, and dilute the currency supply, it's continually transferring wealth out of your pocket, out of your bank account, to the government and to the banking system. The reason that gold and silver are the optimum form of money is because of their properties. It's an easy medium of exchange because gold and silver store a large amount of value in a very small area. It's a unit of account. Pure gold has the same value all over the planet. So an ounce of gold buys the same amount here in Egypt as it would in China or in the United States. It's durable. The same gold that Egyptians were using in trade 5,000 years ago is still here with us today. It does not corrode. It's divisible. You can make change with it. It's very portable. You could use something like oil as money. It's just that you can't carry around a barrel of oil on your back. It's fungible. Pure gold is the same wherever it is on Earth. Pure silver is the same wherever it is on Earth. It's limited in quantity. That's the reason that it maintains its purchasing power. Governments cannot print it. Over the last 5,000 years, only gold and silver have maintained their purchasing power. There have been thousands upon thousands of fiat currencies, currencies that are unbacked by gold or silver, and they have all gone to zero. It's a 100% failure rate.
Well, fiat currency, of course, is a currency that exists at the dictate or by fiat from a government. You say they have their printing presses, and the paper money rolls off the printing presses. And then they give it the fiat designation, which makes the currency official. It's just worthless paper. But when Ben Bernanke gives it the special sign, and they have the cult meeting at the Federal Open Market Committee meetings, it suddenly becomes currency.
If you look at what's really going on, it's a con game. And so there's confidence. Well, the Federal Reserve is very forthright about what they're doing. If you read their websites, they'll tell you it's a confidence game. They tell you that there's no intrinsic value in their money. They'll tell you that they print it backed by absolutely nothing. They actually display all these facts. But if you tell somebody in the public that this stuff is created out of thin air, there's no backing whatsoever, it's absolutely worthless, it's about as valuable as monopoly money, they'll look at you like you're nuts.
Is there an example throughout history of a fiat currency, a piece of paper that's unbacked by anything, surviving?
Short answer, no. Long answer, no. And here's why. When Addison Wiggin took over at the Daily Record, when they got cranked up, Bill Warner asked him to catalog all of the fiat currencies throughout history and what happened to each of them. Addison dutifully went to work. Within a short period of time, he had gone through the alphabet. All the fiat currencies that started with the letter A were done. They all went to zero. He was halfway through the letter B, and all the fiat currencies that started with the letter B, and there were 600 of them in just the first letter and a half of the alphabet, and every single one of them went to zero. Every one. 600 fiat currencies that start with the letter A, and half of the ones that start with the letter B are 600 of these things. Not one ever came close. Do you think this one, the United States dollar, is going to be the first one after all that? I don't think so. No. No currency, fiat currency has ever survived. None.
The thing about money is there actually is a fairly well accepted definition of what money is. The question is, as you apply that definition to particular things that people claim to be money, do they fit the definition? We'll just take the paper dollar, for example. How well does it perform those functions? Well, store of value. The dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing power since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. So not very good as a store of value. One of the things I do is just a way to get the audience's attention is I have a slide, and there are 3 pictures on the slide. One is a pile of monopoly money. The other one is a pile of Federal Reserve notes, what Americans would call paper money. The other one is a solid gold American Eagle 1-ounce coin. And the title of the slide is, which of these is not like the other? And if you know the show Sesame Street, or you have children who watch it. It's one of the favorite vignettes in Sesame Street. And what it really is a kind of IQ test for 5-year-olds. They're supposed to look at the 3 things and look at characteristics and find the one that's not like the other. Well, I've shown this slide to groups of Ivy League university professors, and I've also shown it to children, kind of 5 years old, my nieces and nephews and so forth. And when the professors look at it, they say, well, clearly the dollars are not like the others, because gold has no role as money, and monopoly money is junk, and the American dollar is a store of value, so that's not like the other. But the children look at it and they say, well, the gold coin is not like the other, because the other two are just piles of paper, and the gold coin is clearly something different. So my question to the audience is, who's smarter, a 5-year-old or an Ivy League professor?
Before World War I, each note that a treasury issued would say that there have been deposited with the United States Treasury $20 in gold coin payable to the bearer upon demand. The money was in the vault. The currency was a note they gave you that was a claim check, only a claim check on the money, the same as if you go to the dry cleaners and you give them your shirt and they give you a claim check for your shirt. The value is that shirt at the dry cleaners, not the piece of paper that says that you own that shirt. So our currency that circulated was the paper US dollars, and they were claim checks on money.
The next hidden secret is the difference between currency and money. Money must be a store of value and maintain its purchasing power over long periods of time. As we progress through this series, you'll learn that national currencies are really a tool used by the government and the financial sector to leech away your time and your freedom by stealing your purchasing power. So rather than storing your economic energy, currencies leak. Now compare that to the gold and silver the Egyptians were using. Like I started with, it still wasn't money because it wasn't interchangeable yet. But they were on the right track, as gold and silver have proven over thousands of years to be the ultimate store of value. Gold is only formed when a star explodes, a supernova, and it stays around forever. This is one of the properties that make it the ultimate money.
People are amazed that after 5,000 years, the pyramids are still here. But what I'm more amazed at is that the currency that the people that built this were using, that currency, that gold and silver that they were using in trade on a daily basis, is still around today. It may have been melted down and re-refined, and it's in a coin or a bar or in some piece of jewelry, but it's still with us today, and it still purchases something.
Yes, it is the ultimate money, because there is nothing else even in the same league. It's divisible, it's permanent, it's a store of value, it's a unit of account. It's got everything you want out of money, but it doesn't go away, and it can't be increased. That is what makes gold the most beautiful money of all. What more could you ask out of a money?
It keeps governments under control. You can maintain a solvent system. Governments don't like gold at present because they're getting away with the fiat currencies, and they'll do everything they can to discredit it as an asset class. I mean, my goodness, gold has outperformed the Dow Jones Industrial Average in each of the last 7 years, yet it's not considered a legitimate asset class. Why? Again, it's the fear that maybe gold will be imposed on the system, that it will constrain government ability to spend beyond its means.
They can't print it.
They can't print it, no.
The proper definition of inflation, I use Milton Friedman's definition. Inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Deflation is a contraction of the currency supply. If you expand the currency supply, eventually prices will rise. And if you contract the currency supply, eventually prices will fall. This is a pool, but it's not a pool of water. This is the currency pool. And these are prices. And if you expand the currency supply, prices like a sponge in water have to rise to suck up the excess currency. Governments never stop printing more currency and adding currency to circulation. Therefore, Prices keep on going up not because the stuff that you're trying to buy is changing. The real estate doesn't change. What has changed is the currency purchases less and less. It's the currency going down, not prices going up.
The truth is, what we have that makes our world work right now is a big story. None of it's real. It's all just promises. And if you think about it, that's how currency began to work in the beginning. You know, before we had currency, we had barter. I'll give you 3 coconuts and you give me 4 fish, because that's kind of a fair exchange on coconuts to fish. But that got complicated, so we had to invent this thing called money to be a divisible, portable medium of exchange. And the challenge is that we lost that a long time ago, when we lost having things of value be our currency. And now we have this thing called numbers and accounts. But trust me, it is not real. It's a big made-up story.
One of the biggest make-believe stories ever is called quantitative easing, which sounds complex, but it's really just a smoke and mirrors term for currency creation. QE started with the banking bailouts back in 2009. This currency was created out of thin air and then given to the banks, who paid themselves record bonuses in reward for crashing the world economy. This is a global phenomenon, but all you have to remember for now is that whether it's QE bailouts or stimulus programs, these are all just voodoo, hocus-pocus terms for increased currency creation.
I believe gold and silver will reassert themselves as money. And when they do, there just isn't enough, and their purchasing power is going to go up many, many, many times. Egypt is an amazing place. There's a franticness about it, and utter chaos, especially like the traffic. But when it comes to like all of the merchants that are trying to get every last dime out of you, you get fleeced to the point where you come back with an empty wallet. But you know what? They're amateurs compared to Wall Street. In the past several years, I've spoken in many countries about the crisis that's coming, and a lot of people think that they're going to be okay in their country, that it's only going to happen to the United States or maybe the United States in Europe. But what they don't realize is that this is a global phenomenon. I got to show you something here. This is base currency in the United States. This is the number of paper dollars that exist, basically. It took 200 years to go from no dollars in existence to 825 billion. And then we had the bailouts, and then we had QE1, quantitative easing 1, then QE2, and then we had QE3, and then QE4, and then soon we're going to have QE57 and QE382. And it isn't just here. This is what the Canadian currency supply looks like. This is Australia, South Africa, Russia. Now, this starts out in just the year 2001, and this is like 18 times more currency in existence in a little over a decade. Here's Singapore, same story. Look at that, since the crisis, just bam. India, China, every government on the planet is doing this insane deficit spending and expanding their currency supplies, doing bailouts. And history shows that there is no example of this turning out well.
It is sometimes amazing that we haven't experienced more inflation than we have. If they keep expanding the money supply so vastly, why aren't our prices growing faster than they really are? And the answer is that a good chunk of the money that the Fed created has been shipped overseas. I remember early in my research, I heard this expression that the Americans have exported their inflation. I thought, what is that? How can you export your inflation? Put it in a box and send it out? What do you do? Well, now I understand. You export your inflation by simply sending all these dollars that you created to these other countries, and then they send you their refrigerators and their cars and whatever, their TV sets. So you get hardware, and they get little pieces of paper. It's a great deal for the American people for a while. For a while. Sooner or later, all of those pigeons come home to roost. When the time comes, as it looks like it's now coming, when the rest of the world is saying, we don't want to play this game anymore. Uncle Sam's dollars are just becoming worthless. There are too many of them. We've got to find something else other than American dollars. Then those dollars start to come back to America. People say, we don't want them anymore. What do we do with them? Once this revs up and we've got this little trickle of money coming back that we previously exported, once it becomes a flood and it starts to rush back, now we are getting our former exported inflation brought back to us, and then we'll see the quantity of money inside the United States grow much more rapidly even than the Federal Reserve can create it, because we're getting a previous money back. And that's when we will really see the tanking of the US dollar in terms of what it will buy.
During the second round of quantitative easing, global food prices went up 60%. And this created a humanitarian disaster for the 2 billion people on Earth who live on less than $2 a day. These people were hungry to start with, they became hungrier, and some of them started overthrowing their governments in North Africa and around the Middle East. So quantitative easing was the spark that ignited the Arab Spring. So that's it. When you create money, you get some sort of inflation. It just depends on where the inflation goes.
It's all going down, down, down. Peasants are reeling from a game of coins and crowns.
Given the premise that you have a permanent underclass or poor class, and how does inflation affect them disproportionately, it affects them basically in the percentage of their income that goes to food. And we see this as a ratio, and we know that there are some danger points. For example, in Egypt recently, once that ratio got to 40% of income going to food and the price of food rising due to inflation, when it got to 40%, that's historically a point where people actually stage a revolution. That's exactly what we saw. The French Revolution, similarly, was all around the price of food getting to a certain critical point where people simply, the risk-reward for revolution was favorable toward revolution.
When they print it up, then it all goes down.
Well, exactly right, because when you have a runaway inflation, it's punishing the very people who are most productive in society. In other words, the people that produce more than they consume and save the difference. The problem is that those productive people, the savers, save in their national currency. And unfortunately, the national currency is just a fiat piece of paper at this point. So when it's destroyed through runaway inflation, that $100,000 that you were hoping to retire on doesn't exist. And the things that you were going to buy with it and provide for others don't exist either. Now what are you going to do?
So that all seems pretty scary. However, this is going to happen, and you can only play the hand that you're dealt. But the great news is that gold and silver always end up doing an accounting of the expansion of the currency supplies. Basically, the will of the public and the free markets. When governments do this kind of stuff to their currency supply, they debase it. Eventually it comes back in inflation. People sense the loss of their purchasing power. They rush back to gold and silver, and they bid the value of the gold and silver up in the country until it meets or exceeds the value of all the currency in circulation. This is a process that's been going on over and over again throughout history, except this time it's happening on a global scale. It has never before happened in all countries at once. And that means that this is the greatest wealth transfer in history. Therefore, it's the greatest opportunity in history, and it's not going to happen again in your lifetime.
So now we've learned that your true wealth is your time and your freedom. Money is a trading tool that stores the economic energy that is your time and freedom, whereas currencies leak them away. Gold and silver are the ultimate money simply because of their properties. Fiat currencies are based solely on confidence and always return to their intrinsic value of zero. Governments don't like gold because it imposes restraint. Rising prices are a symptom of an expanding currency supply, and gold and silver always account for an expanding currency supply.
So the US dollar is about 60% of the value of all the currency on the planet, and more than half of the dollars reside outside the United States. The reason they
every country has US dollars is, first of all, that's what central banks use as a reserve currency. Second of all, oil is priced in dollars. So this is the world, and what you see here is that these are the countries that are avoiding the US dollar in trade. They're doing bilateral agreements where they'll either hold each other's currency and settle that way, or they're establishing, like right now, they're talking about a BRICS bank, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, having a bank that will do settlements between the countries directly without using the US dollar. These countries, they tried to avoid using the US dollar, like Iran tried, and we banned them from using SWIFT. How many here have made wire transfers before? So do you know what a SWIFT number is? It's a code that you plug in, and this SWIFT system is what transfers those dollars from one person's account to another person's account. Well, Iran decided that they were going to sell oil only in euros. They got banned from SWIFT. But there's countries right now coming up with a replacement for SWIFT. And it doesn't use the dollar, it's the Sukra system. And Iraq started selling oil for euros. In Libya, they were talking about creating the gold dinar and selling oil for gold. So those are the countries that are trying to use something other than the dollar. Then we've got gold competing with currency. And there's a lot of talk around here about the gold dinar, and there's people that are actually using gold in some of the countries over here. And then in Utah has recognized gold and silver as money again. It's legal tender currency in the state of Utah in the United States. And then you've got physical gold accumulation. I'll show you later that China is accumulating an immense amount of gold, but all the countries with an up arrow, that's gold accumulation. Then we have gold repatriation. Germany has been asking for their gold back, and they're getting it. Venezuela has repatriated their gold from the Bank of England. And then if we put this on a timeline, here's the nails in the coffin for the dollar standard, and you will see that there's not a lot of time left. This is my evidence that I think is proof that the death of the dollar is coming, and it's coming shortly. Nixon ended Bretton Woods, and we went on the dollar standard. Then the first nail in the coffin is Iraq sells oil in euros. The crisis of 2008, and we added 1.25 trillion to our base money in the United States. As we add to the base currency, people get worried about inflation. They start rushing toward gold and silver. Iran ends oil sales in dollars, and they're taking commodities in trade for oil. They're taking, in Turkey, they take the local currency and then buy gold in Turkey and export the gold to Iran. So they're basically selling oil for gold. They do the same thing with India. QE2, quantitative easing, that's more currency printing in the United States. Libya, China and Russia bypassed the dollar. They did a bilateral trade agreement where they hold each other's currency, and they do direct debt settlement without having to wire transfer US dollars. Chinese president just recently said that the dollar as the world's reserve currency is a product of the past. Utah recognized silver and gold as money. China and Iran bypassed the US dollar with a bilateral trade agreement. Venezuela repatriates its gold. China and Japan trade directly. India and Japan bypass the US dollar. Russia and Iran trade directly. Iran sells India oil for rupees and commodities. China and Brazil trade directly. Swiss citizens demand gold repatriation. African countries ban the dollar. In Zambia, you can go to jail if you use US dollars. Quantitative easing number 3. They have announced at the Federal Reserve that they're starting with $40 billion of currency that they're creating each month, and now it jumps to $85 billion. That's more than $1 trillion a year. And remember, it took 200 years to go from no dollars to 825 billion, and now they're going to create $1 trillion every year. Iran trading energy for gold. Singapore removes tax on money.
Germany repatriates 150 tons of gold from the New York Fed. The citizens of Netherlands demand gold repatriation. Ecuador repatriates part of its gold reserves. Austrian citizens demanding gold repatriation. China acknowledges fundamental market shortage of gold. And now, the Fed is increasing the rate of printing. I said from 40 to 85 billion every month, just over $1 trillion per year. So those are the nails in the coffin for the dollar standard. And if you noticed, they're all speeding up and they're all happening right now. You don't have a whole lot of time. And if you wait too long, then the opportunity is gone.
It's going to fail. Why is the dollar sacrosanct? Why is it not going to happen to the US dollar? Well, it will. People think, oh no, it's high technology, or we have computers now, or the internet. And these are ridiculous arguments. The truth is, all fiat currencies have failed, and there's no reason why this one won't. What worries me again so much is that it's a global situation. And so it's going to cause problems on a global basis. And it's a trust breaking down. And you're already seeing the trust breaking down, as I said earlier, because you're seeing different countries exchange directly with each other's currencies, circumventing the dollar. You're seeing that in oil. You're going to see it more and more, and people are just going to opt out of the dollar. And you'll probably get to a point before the whole thing collapses entirely where the dollar is more or less used internally in the United States and externally is not used as much, because there'll be a lot of agreements made between nation states outside of the United States that will want to use each other's currency and not the dollar.
This isn't going to be pretty when it happens. I am not an end-of-worlder or a doomsday guy. All you can do is play the hand that you are dealt. If we go to a new monetary system, and I think it's absolutely inevitable, there's just too much energy built up in this one that has to release. It has to come crashing down somehow. When that happens, there's an enormous wealth transfer for people that are on one side of the bet or another. And people don't realize that whether they think they are making a bet or not, they are making the bet. They are involved. This wealth transfer affects everybody, whether you want to participate or not. If you're holding paper assets and paper currencies, you have bet one direction. If you're holding gold and physical assets, you've bet the opposite direction.
So these are changes in Chinese holdings. They are accumulating gold, they are getting rid of US Treasury bonds. This is gold held in China. The green line is the cumulative gold, that's on this side, this scale. So it's gone from about 700 tons to almost 6,000 tons just since the year 2000. So this is their central bank holdings, this is their mine supply, but this is, and my researcher put all of this data together. You're the first people to see this. This is the amount of gold flowing through the Hong Kong exchange that goes into China. And the past couple of years here, they have ramped up their buying. They know that the dollar standard is coming to an end, and they are protecting themselves, and you're probably going to see gold-backed renminbi someday, the yuan. So this is an interesting chart. Changing global influence. So this is the correlation to this basket of currencies. This basket of currencies, if you add them all up, they're trading up or they're trading down. And this was pre-crisis, so it's before 2008. So this is from the International Monetary Fund, it's their data. So from 2005 to 2008, this is the correlation of, if that basket of currencies was trading up, the dollar was probably doing about the same thing is what it's saying. The Chinese renminbi, a little less so. And then this is today. The US dollar is done for.
I don't think there's any question we're heading for a new monetary system. The question is, what will it consist of? The four choices are sort of a world of multiple reserve currencies. And Barry Eichengreen, Berkeley, is the leading proponent of this, or leading scholar on this topic. The problem with that, and where I disagree with Eichengreen, is there's no anchor in that system. We did have multiple reserve currencies before in the 1920s. He's right about that, and it was sterling and the dollar, but they were both anchored to gold. And in the post-Bretton Woods world, since 1944, it's been one reserve currency, which is the anchor, and it was anchored to gold until 1971. Since then, the dollar has been detached from gold, but all the other currencies are still linked to the dollar. So at the end of the day, we've had an anchor of some kind. We've never had a world of multiple reserve currencies with no anchor. I'm not sure that's that stable. The SDR is the second choice. The SDR is a basket currency sponsored by the IMF. At least for the time being, it's also printed money. The IMF literally prints the SDRs and ships them out to the members. And their reserves go up, exactly the way the Fed creates money and bank reserves go up. But it's not backed by anything. Third choice is gold, some variation on the gold standard. And the fourth choice is what I call chaos, which is that nobody does anything. There's a lot of wishful thinking, there's a lot of denial, there's a lot of delay, and we get to the point where people just totally lose faith in paper currencies, go to hard assets, and we have a sequential collapse of paper currencies around the world, at which point governments will have to react with emergency measures. And that could include coercion, confiscation, various sorts of freezes on paper assets. It could be a lot of things in that scenario. So to me, it's multiple reserve currencies, SDRs, gold, or chaos. I favor gold, but I fear that we may get chaos.
I've talked about every 30 to 40 years the world has a new monetary system. And the thing is that over the years, governments and the banks have basically screwed us more and more and more. And these new currency systems are always created by the same idiots that created the last one that fell apart. It's the big banks, it's the central banks, and it's governments that are creating these new systems each time. And each time, the system they come up with is a system that cheats the population more and enriches the government and the banks more. It's a system that transfers wealth at greater and greater speeds. This one is going to fall apart just like all of the others. There's a difference this time, though. There's the internet. People are connected all over the world. Information is spreading, and people are getting educated. So I'm hoping that we go back to gold. Not a gold standard. Gold standards suck. I did a video on that. With a gold standard, there's supposed to be a certain amount of gold in the vaults for each unit of currency. In other words, it's a 1-to-1 ratio is the way it started. And then they print more receipts than gold that exists. So if we have gold standards, we're going to get scammed again. If we used gold and silver, if the public gets educated enough before all of this happens, if we went back to gold and silver, then governments can't scam us. It limits their ability to transfer wealth from the population to the government and to the banks.
A lot of people say that you can't use gold and silver today because they're too heavy and bulky, and it's completely wrong. You could put gold and silver in a vault, and you could make payments to somebody by transferring ownership of nanograms, grams, or ounces of gold and silver from one person's account to another by means of a check, a credit card, or even your cell phone. If we go back to a gold-backed currency, gold-backed US dollar, at that point, I think the minimum scam that the US could get away with, which means the minimum number of dollars in existence that they could make convertible into gold, would be the dollars that are held in foreign central banks. That would be similar to the Bretton Woods system that we had from 1944 to 71. Well, I did some analysis on this when I was writing the book back in 2005, and back then it required $20,000 an ounce gold for the Treasury to have enough gold to cover those dollars, or the New York Fed, actually. And if they were going to back all of the dollars, you're talking gold measured in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per ounce. There just isn't that much gold, and there's a whole lot of currency. We keep on printing it every minute of every day. This is gold and how it accounts for a currency supply. This is our base money in the United States, which was gold back here from 1900 until the Federal Reserve. The amount of currency in circulation in gold were the same. And then we established the Federal Reserve, and we inflated for World War I, and we had more currency in circulation than we had gold to back it.
There were some bank runs in the 30s. Then Roosevelt unpegged the dollar from gold, and gold's value rose from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce. And when it did, the value of the gold held at the U.S. Treasury rose to meet the value of all the currency that was printed in the meantime. Here's the same chart again, but now I'm taking it out to 1971. And what you see is these gold inflows during World War I. During World War II, it's another 117% gold increase. This is what made the United States a superpower. It's all financial. It isn't our war machine necessarily. It's all the gold inflows that we got because everybody else was at war and we were isolated from it. And they had to pay us for all their consumer goods and so on. And then we jumped into the war and we inflated. And then in about 1959, countries started figuring out that we didn't have all the gold. You know, we were printing more dollars than gold that we had to back it. And under the Bretton Woods system, they could go to the New York Fed and turn in their dollars for gold at $35 per ounce. Only foreign central banks. Individuals couldn't do that. So gold started flowing out, and the U.S. lost 50% of its gold from 59 to 71. And in the meantime, we kept on printing currency. If this had continued until it got down to zero, if there was one more dollar out there that laid claim to gold, that came in and said, we want our gold for a currency, and there was no gold to back it up, the entire world monetary system would have come crashing down. So Nixon had to take us off of the Bretton Woods system, the last vestiges of the gold standard in August 15th of 71. So here's the same chart again. There's the first chart and the second chart to 71, and now I'm taking it out to 85, and I'm adding a second line here. How many people would agree that credit cards are replacing cash in circulation? Yeah? Credit cards, you use your credit card more and more every year, right? You use cash less and less. Well, this is outstanding credit card balances. It's called revolving credit outstanding is the name of the chart that you get from the Federal Reserve. When you charge something on a credit card, you create currency. The bank didn't actually loan you anything. They invented numbers. And then they have the gall to charge you interest if you don't pay those numbers back on time. So the thing is that the merchant that you're paying, the restaurant or the grocery store, that merchant's checking account can't tell the difference between the credit dollars that you created or the cash dollars that you pay them. So to that merchant's checking account, it all looks the same. And those dollars that you created stay in circulation until somebody saves them up and pays down credit card debt. So unpaid credit card balances I include as part of the cash in circulation. And in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard and gold became a freely traded separate commodity/money, and it did an accounting of the currency supply. There was quite a while here where we could have gone back on the gold standard. The value of the gold at the Treasury exceeded all the dollars printed from George Washington to Jimmy Carter. And for a week or so, a couple of weeks, it exceeded base money plus outstanding revolving credit. So here's the same chart again. That was to 1985, and now I'm going to take it out to today. And so there's that 1980 peak where it shot past base money and base money plus outstanding revolving credit. And then we get to the crisis of 08. And Ben Bernanke, oh, by the way, instead of billions, we're now measuring in trillions. So we started in millions, and then it went to billions, and now it's trillions. So we did the bailouts and all the quantitative easings, and that's what the currency supply looks like today. And then they announced quantitative easing 3, which is that $85 billion a month that they're creating, and they think they're going to have to do it until about 2015. So here's the projection for gold covering the currency supply today would be $13,400 per ounce gold, for history to repeat and for gold to do the same thing that it did in 1934 and in 1980. And believe me, it shocked people in the 1970s. When gold was $35 an ounce and Nixon took us off the Bretton Woods system,
all the economists were predicting that gold was going to go down because now there was going to be no more monetary demand for it. Anybody that said gold was going to go to $100 was considered an absolute lunatic, and it went to $850. It rose 24 times its price. Well, when I wrote my book, we were right here with base money. So base money plus outstanding revolving credit. It took about $6,000 an ounce for history to repeat. Today it takes $13,400, and if you include the same overshoot, remember in 1980 it didn't just cover base money, but it shot past it. $24,000 an ounce gold is what it would require to meet that, except the Fed has announced that they're going to keep on printing currency until there's lower unemployment and the economy gets back on track. And they think till 2015. So the projected price, according to the Fed and history repeating, if the Fed does this and then history repeats and gold, the public gets afraid of what the Federal Reserve is doing and they rush toward gold and silver to protect their purchasing power, gold would have to rise from there to way up here, and that is $26,000 per ounce gold to cover. If it does the same overshoot, we're talking about $47,000 an ounce gold. Now, I don't even like to measure gold in dollars. If you measure it in a price doesn't mean anything. It's the value. How much can you buy with the proceeds? If we have deflation and some of this currency evaporates, because it's all just numbers that they type into a computer these days, if we have deflation, maybe gold peaks at $3,000 an ounce and the currency supply collapses to way down here somewhere, and the Dow is at 1,500. That means gold will still be double the Dow. You're still going to get 14 times more paper assets one day than you can buy today with them, and it's probably only a couple of years left that this is going to take, as you saw by how the nails in the coffin of the dollar standard, how they're speeding up. If we have big inflation and the Dow goes to 30,000, maybe gold will be 60,000 an ounce. And if we have hyperinflation, the Dow would be 30 trillion and gold would be 60 trillion. It doesn't matter. In any case, gold would buy you 14 times more paper assets than it does today. So these are the global assets. Here's the bond market. Here's the stock market. This is the value of real estate on the planet. And these are bank deposits, and there's gold. Now, that little slice of the pie is going to get a lot bigger in just the next few years, and it's not going to do it by a whole bunch more gold just appearing. It's going to do it by the price of other assets going down, or at least their value going down, and the value of gold going up. So the price of gold will change. That piece of the pie is going to grow. It was a lot bigger back in 1980 when gold was at $850. It's going to get a lot bigger today again, but today, as you've seen, it requires far, far higher prices. So, the death of the dollar standard. How many people here believe that I'm sort of predicting what's going on in the future here? You can see that there's a new world monetary system coming. It happens every 30 to 40 years, except this time, instead of a baby step off of gold, we've got to go from nothing back to something. It's going to be a worldwide convulsion, the scale of which has never been seen before.
At the end of the day, the fundamental driver of gold, it's not so much that gold's in a bull market, it's more the dollar's in a bear market. And people say, well, how high can gold go? And my answer is, well, how low can the dollar go? The answer is the dollar can go to zero. If you divide any number by zero, the answer is infinity. So gold can go to infinity if the dollar goes to zero. Now, in the real world, something else will happen. It's not that gold becomes worth infinite number of dollars. It's more the case that the dollar just falls off the stage. The dollar gets the hook, so to speak. And you'll count gold in dollars to 5,000 to 10,000 at some point, but there will come a time when you won't count gold in dollars anymore because dollars won't count. People won't want dollars.
There is so much opportunity in crisis, it is absolutely extraordinary. That's just not me saying that, that's just history. You read any amount of history, and I don't mean last week, I mean real history. You know, in times of crisis, it's when huge fortunes were made. In times of crisis, it's when human beings create and develop newest technologies and newest science and new medicines. In times of crisis, there's so much opportunity as long as you can remain calm, get educated, be resourceful. The challenge for most people is that in crisis, they go into crisis mode, which which means they go into scarcity, they go into lack, they go into blame, and none of those emotions are resourceful for helping you solve whatever challenge is in front of you.
I believe that this is probably the greatest opportunity of anyone's lifetime. There has never been a situation where everything came together just like this. This is the first time in history where all the world's currencies are just fiat currencies backed by nothing. And if what I think is going to happen happens, this is the greatest wealth transfer in history. It's the greatest opportunity, and it'll never happen in our lifetimes again.
So now we've learned the following hidden secrets of money. There is a global loss of confidence in the US dollar that is accelerating rapidly. The change to a new monetary system is inevitable and will most likely be chaotic. Gold standards do not work over long periods of time, but gold itself does. The public contributes to the massive amounts of currency creation by using credit cards and signing loans. Gold has already accounted for the expansion of US dollars twice in the last century and may likely do so again.